Go into the world and tell every man that you meet, there is a man on the cross.
A Catholic Take. What you need to know right now. A bold synthesis of inspiration and information. Keeping you up to date on the news and issues from a courageous Catholic perspective.
A Catholic Take with Joe McLean starts now.
Praise be Jesus Christ. Welcome to A Catholic Take, a bold synthesis of information and information. I'm your host, Michael Hitchborn, filling in for Joe McLean, who is taking a much-needed and well-deserved vacation. Brent Haynes will be our guest at 14 past the hour. We'll be discussing how freedom of speech is essential to true religious freedom. Alana Alfaro is joining us at 30 past the hour to discuss how she got involved with the occult and then escaped to come home to the Catholic Church. We've got a ton of red meat in today's show with a lot to unpack, so let's get started as we always do by turning to Our Lady. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Ghost, Amen. Remember, O most gracious Virgin Mary, that never was it known that anyone who fled to thy protection, implored thy help, or sought thy intercession was left unaided. Inspired by this confidence, I fly unto thee, O Virgin of Virgins, my mother. To thee do I come, before thee I stand, sinful and sorrowful. O Mother of the Word incarnate, despise not my petitions, but in thy mercy hear and answer me. Amen. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Ghost. Amen. And now, your saint of the day.
Saint John the Baptist, pray for us. King Herod had imprisoned our Lord's cousin John because of the saint's zealous denunciation of Herod's adulterous marriage to his brother's wife, Herodias. The queen hated John far more than did the king, who remained fascinated by John's preaching. When Herodias' daughter danced shamelessly before Herod and his men at the king's birthday dinner, Herod promised any favor the girl wished in return. Herodias told her daughter to ask for John's head, and the wicked girl herself added the order that it be brought on a platter. Herod was shocked, but fulfilled his foolish oath. According to St. Jerome, the cruel Herodias was still not content, and continued to stab at the saint's tongue with a needle or small dagger. This feast commemorating John's martyrdom has always deferred in prominence to the Feast of the Forerunner's Nativity on June 24th, and the day is tinged with less joy than even the usual Feast of a Martyr, because John did not proceed directly to heaven at his death. Nonetheless, the beheading or decollation of St. John is among the oldest and most widely celebrated feast days known to the Church, as befitting the precursor of Christ and the man of whom our Lord himself said that none greater was ever born of woman. For more about this day and others in the Church's calendar, visit thestationofthecross.com/saints&seasons. St. John the Baptist, pray for us.
And now, here are your headline news. Just the News reports at least 9 states have pro-abortion ballot measures for November. Arizona, Colorado, Florida, Maryland, Missouri, Montana, Nebraska, Nevada, and South Dakota all have ballot measures that will enshrine abortion rights into the state constitutions if passed in November. In South Dakota, a pro-life group is suing in an attempt to remove the initiative from the ballot, and the Thomas More Society brought a lawsuit against the Missouri ballot measure last week on behalf of state lawmakers. The lawmakers argue that, quote, the fundamental right to reproductive freedom that the amendment proposes is, quote, largely undefined, and thus violates state law and the Missouri Constitution. Meanwhile, a pro-abortion group is suing the Missouri Secretary of State over his office's description of the ballot measure, arguing that the language is, quote, intentionally argumentative and is likely to create prejudice against the proposed measure, end quote, the Associated Press reported. The Hill reports Supreme Court won't reinstate Biden's new student debt plan. The Supreme Court yesterday discarded the Biden administration's request to temporarily reinstate its new student debt plan that would lower payments for millions of borrowers. The Justice Department's emergency appeal asked the Supreme Court to lift a lower court ruling currently halting President Biden's plan as a legal challenge proceeds. The order had no public dissidence. It is not a final ruling, and the legality of the plan could ultimately return to the High Court. Two groups of Republican state attorneys general, have challenged the plan, contending Biden doesn't have legal authority to implement it, and it flouts the Supreme Court's decision last year, striking down one of the president's early student debt programs. Both lawsuits reached the Supreme Court in recent weeks on its emergency docket after conflicting rulings in lower courts. And those are your headline news. Today's gospel from the memorial of the Passion of St. John the Baptist in the new calendar is taken from Mark 6, 17 through 29. Herod was the one who had John the Baptist arrested and bound in prison on account of Herodias, the wife of his brother Philip, whom he had married. John had said to Herod, "It is not lawful for you to have your brother's wife." Herodias harbored a grudge against him and wanted to kill him, but was unable to do so. Herod feared John, knowing him to be a righteous and holy man, and kept him in custody. When he heard him speak, he was very much perplexed, yet he liked to listen to him. She had an opportunity one day when Herod, on his birthday, gave a banquet for his courtiers, his military officers, and the leading men of Galilee. Herodias' own daughter came in and performed a dance that delighted Herod and his guests. The king said to the girl, "Ask of me whatever you wish, and I will grant it to you." He even swore many things to her. "I will grant you whatever you ask of me, even to half of my kingdom." She went out and said to her mother, "What shall I ask for?" She replied, "The head of John the Baptist." The girl hurried back to the king's presence and made her request. "I want you to give me at once, on a platter, the head of John the Baptist." The king was deeply distressed, but because of his oaths and the guests, he did not wish to break his word to her. So he promptly dispatched an executioner with orders to bring back his head. He went off and beheaded him in the prison. He brought in the head on a platter and gave it to the girl. The girl gave it to her mother. When his disciples heard about it, they came and took his body and laid it in a tomb. The Gospel of the Lord. Praise to you, Lord Jesus Christ. The commentary on today's Gospel comes from the great Cornelius a Lapide. This Herod was not the great, who was called Herod of Ascalon, who slew the infants of Bethlehem, but his son, surnamed Antipas, who arrayed Christ in a white robe and mocked him. He it was who beheaded John the Baptist. This Herodias was the daughter of Aristobulus, Herod's brother. Herod then had married her who was his niece, being his brother's daughter. So Josephus, Herodias, therefore, was the sister of Herod Agrippa, who killed James, and who was himself slain by an angel. Herod repudiated the daughter of Arrhenius to marry Herodias. For this reason, Arrhenius made war upon him and cut his army to pieces, as Josephus relates, adding, quote, "It was an opinion among the Jews that Herod's army was destroyed by the just vengeance of God because of John the Baptist, a holy man whom he had slain." Whether Herodias married Herod whilst her husband Philip was alive or after his death, commentators do not agree. But it is certain that either way, it was an illicit marriage and involved incest, in which was added adultery, if Philip were still alive. For by Leviticus, it is forbidden to marry a brother, or forbidden for a brother to marry his brother's wife, if there were offspring of the marriage. And Philip had left his dancing daughter, whom Josephus calls Salome. But I say that Herod did marry Herodias during his brother's lifetime and against his will, and so committed, therefore, a threefold sin. The first, adultery. The second, incest. The third, violence. This is proved, first, because Josephus expressly asserts it. Second, because the incestuous marriage took place about the 15th year of Tiberius Caesar, for that was when John began to preach, as is plain from Luke 3. But Philip died in the 20th year of Tiberius, as Josephus affirms, where he praises him for his justice and modesty. Third, because the fathers everywhere accuse Herod of adultery, because he took away his wife from his brother, who was of a meek disposition, whilst he yet was living. Thus Herod took advantage of his gentleness. At first, therefore, it was only Herodias who wished to kill John, as the rebuker of her adultery. Herod did not assent, as Mark here signifies, and Luke. But afterwards she persuaded Herod, which did the more easily because, as Josephus asserts, it was a malignant disposition and prone to cruelty. And he had incensed John on account of his frequent reproofs. Herodias was afraid, says Bede, lest Herod should some time or other come to proper mind under John's rebuke and dissolve the marriage, and restore Herodias to his brother Philip. You're listening to a Catholic Take, a bold synthesis of inspiration and information. When we come back, we will talk to Brent Haynes, a good longtime friend of the show. Welcome back to a Catholic Take, a bold synthesis of information and inspiration. We've got Brent Haynes on the line. He's a longtime friend of the show, Catholic attorney and freedom fighter. He joins us and has some updates for us on Mark Zuckerberg's weird admission of Facebook censorship. Brent, welcome back to the program.
Hey, thank you, Michael. Hello, everybody. Yes, do you remember back during COVID, Michael, when, of course, the country was facing this epidemic, the shutdowns, this new disease? There were questions about treating it. And people, of course, would circulate different stories about different medicines. Some people would raise questions. Some people would admittedly advertise or advocate, questionable treatments. But do you remember how when anything came up that went against the government line, if you posted that on Facebook, you got shut down immediately? Do you remember that?
Not only do I remember it, but I experienced it. My own Facebook page was shut down because I dared to question the public narrative.
And you would hear stories. Sometimes there would be denials about this, or there would be claims that people weren't really being censored. But, of course, it couldn't really be denied at the time. Then, of course, there was the Hunter Biden laptop story in 2020. Do you remember that? The New York Post broke a story about Hunter Biden's laptop. It had incriminating information about the Biden family and its connections to Burisma, money from foreign sources, especially from the Ukraine and China. It came out in the fall of 2020, only weeks before the presidential election. And what happened? We heard over and over again that this was Russian disinformation and that this was interference with the presidential election, and that the Hunter Biden laptop was, in the words of many of those intelligence professionals who signed that joint letter, that it was a classic example of Russian disinformation. And what happened to that story, not just on Facebook, but everywhere? That story didn't get publicized. That story was shot down. Remember that?
Sure do. In fact, when that story came out, once again, I noticed that my Facebook page was throttled, but I got a lot of pushback where people were saying, "Oh, this is Russian disinformation. This isn't true. These are all fake." And I went through a lot of the photographs that were contained on that laptop, and I did not see any indication of fakery. And I pointed out, "Hey, look, I understand Photoshop. I can tell you what's Photoshopped and what isn't." And it was a very interesting time as people just kind of bought the public narrative and didn't allow for the pushback or even the reasonable explanations that we were able to come up with to show, hey, look, this is true.
Well, this, of course, continued to be an issue. Then there was a lawsuit that was successful in the trial court at first, a lawsuit by attorneys general and Facebook users against the government for pressuring the media, including Facebook, not just Facebook, but for pressuring social media, rather. It went all the way up to the Supreme Court, which actually struck down the plaintiff's lawsuit. And the plaintiffs had asked the Supreme Court to stop the government from pressuring social media and essentially engaging in censorship. After all, if the government can't censor free speech, why should it be allowed to pressure social media organizations or other private parties to censor free speech? Unfortunately, we lost that fight. Now, we didn't lose on the merits. The Supreme Court said that these weren't the right people to bring the lawsuit, although one of them was a Facebook user who had been censored, so it's hard to see how that lawsuit would succeed otherwise. But here's the point. Mark Zuckerberg, the, of course, founder and head of Facebook, has now come out and extraordinarily written a letter to the government, to the House Judiciary Committee, and said, yes, it's all true. It's all true. The federal government came in and pressured us. They came in and pressured us during COVID. They came in and pressured us about the Hunter Biden laptop during the 2020 election, and we gave in, and now he says they shouldn't have done it. Now, Mark Zuckerberg, as far as any of us know, is no friend of the conservative movement. He gave millions of dollars to essentially get out the vote organizations of the 2020 election, which he also says in this letter he's not going to do again. And now Mark Zuckerberg all of a sudden has come out, written this letter, admitted that this is all true, and sort of essentially come clean. People can go online, they can read the letter online, they can follow the link that will be in the show notes. The story is all over the internet because Mark Zuckerberg, that's news that can't be suppressed. But the point here is people who complained all along about being limited, about being shadow banned, people who were accused of being mistaken or being conspiracy theorists for making claims about censorship, they've been completely vindicated by the events of the last few years. So now Mark Zuckerberg comes out and says, yes, all of this is true. And remember, there were polls after the 2020 presidential election. I saw one that said that if voters had known about the Hunter Biden laptop story, a small percentage would have changed their votes. I saw one poll that said 8% would have changed their votes in the presidential election. But remember how close the 2020 presidential election was. An 8% change would have caused a landslide for the losing candidate in 2020. Instead, he would have won. So this just shows you, how important free speech is. And it's just extraordinary now that Mark Zuckerberg, no friend of Donald Trump, no friend of the conservative movement, no friend of the Catholic Church, as far as I know, has now come out and admitted that everything all the critics have been saying is true, essentially admitted that what was claimed in that lawsuit was true. And look, to his credit, he's saying they shouldn't have done it and they're not going to do it anymore.
Well, gosh, it's one thing to just apologize and say, gee, Willikers, guys, I'm so sorry for censoring you and for, getting involved in this polemical issue. But it's another thing to be involved in what is very truly election interference. How does Mark Zuckerberg escape any charges of election interference, and what's it going to take to actually bring charges of election interference to him and to Facebook you can't fix what happened in 2020, but to fully ensure that something like this never, ever happens again, despite his, gosh, guys, this isn't going to happen again. I'm not going to do this again. No. I think we need to have some sort of legal action that's going to make sure that never happens again.
Well, Facebook is a private company. They can publish whatever stories they want or allow or prohibit or promote whatever stories their users put on their individual Facebook pages as much or as little as they want. But you really hit on a critical topic. Facebook is a private company, but it has become the public forum, or what in legal terms is called the public square. It is where, or is one of the few places online in the virtual world where people go to exchange ideas. There have been talks about amending the federal law that allows them to be immune to lawsuits. That's one possible answer. There could be action on that at some point if enough congressmen are upset about it. But, there's another approach, which I suggest that legal scholars and legislators ought to take seriously, which is it would be possible, and of course you have to be careful because you want government regulation, private companies to be done very carefully, and you certainly want to be careful in terms of regulation, not to suppress free speech, but to promote it and let it flourish. But Facebook and online social media companies, depending on the definition and depending on their size, could be regulated in such a way that, like utilities, they have to meet certain requirements, or they have to do certain things. So, for example, the government could pass a law that says that all of the laws that apply to the public square that is owned by the government, such as a park where people go to speak freely, or such as sidewalks where people go out and demonstrate, a law could be passed that would say that the same legal principles that apply to the public square apply to certain social media companies that hold themselves out for certain products and services to a certain number of people, say, to just open to the public in general. That has the advantage of importing an established body of law that has been well developed by the Supreme Court for decades on what the government can and cannot do to suppress speech. And it would simply tell private companies like Facebook that essentially become the new public square, look, you have to respect free speech in the First Amendment the same way the government has to respect free speech in the First Amendment.
Well, doesn't a lot of the question really boil down to whether Facebook constitutes a publisher or a what do they call it, a platform, a speech platform? Kind of like go ahead.
That goes back to the federal law that protects them from suit, immunity from suit. So, there are advantages and disadvantages with that either way. But regardless, whether they can be sued, and look, if they can be sued, they're just going to shut down everything. I'll tell you that as a lawyer. If Station of the Cross could be sued for everything that you and I say or Joe McClain says, Station of the Cross is out of business. Or they put everything on the air, and everything they put on the air is just so risk-free that it's hardly worth stating. So, that's one issue. And if they can be sued, they're just going to be excessively cautious. But if you say to them, look, you can essentially do what you want, just do this, just respect free speech the way the government respects free speech, then they wouldn't be able to go in and say, well, we like Joe's speech, but we don't like Michael's speech. We like his speech, but we don't like her speech. They would simply have to allow the platform to be just like your local public park, to be just like the sidewalk in front of Planned Parenthood. You can go to the sidewalk in front of Planned Parenthood and you can post a sign, or not post a sign, but you can carry a sign. You can walk back and forth. You can pray the rosary. You can hand out literature. You can talk to people, and they can either listen to you or not. They can either take your literature or not, but you're allowed to speak. And that idea of saying that Facebook is simply, even though it's a private company, is the digital, online, virtual equivalent of the public square, would respect free speech, and we would have established legal principles that all lawyers already know, that are easily defined, and then those could be, to a large extent, applied to Facebook and other certain social media companies, and that would help with free speech. And look, the free speech online is under serious threat. This is, the federal government going after the social media companies and pressuring them during COVID and about the Hunter Biden laptop story. This is not a one-off. This is why Joe and I talk about this frequently. In Europe, they have a commission that regulates online productivity. Or online publishing. You saw there was an arrest in France recently from the publisher because of Telegram. Yeah, I don't know if you saw that or the listeners did, but he landed in France, came off the plane. They arrested him. It's because of his social media company. Canada has a bill that establishes what's called the Digital Safety Commission with nearly unlimited power to regulate online platforms that can fine people based on complaints. So free speech online is important, and Mark Zuckerberg's statement is extraordinary, and it's a great step in the right direction.
We've got to head to a break. Brent, thanks so much for joining us this morning. You're listening to A Catholic Take, a bold synthesis of information and information. When we get back, we'll be talking to Alana Alfaro, a former witch who found her way home to the Catholic faith. You won't want to miss it, so stay tuned.
Download the app to take our programming with you wherever you go. Hear what listeners are saying about the regularly updated iCatholic Radio app.
The programs on iCatholic Radio are uplifting, educational, and have served to deepen my faith as a Catholic. Thank you for this amazing station.
Download the free iCatholic Radio app in your Android or Apple store today. If you already have the app, please consider giving us a 5-star review or telling a friend about it.
Catholic Take, a bold synthesis of information and inspiration. Here are your headline news. LifeSite News reports, Secret Service suspends at least 5 agents. It's been more than a month since the assassination attempt on Donald Trump, and only now are Secret Service agents being held responsible for failing to protect the former president. At least 5 members of the Secret Service have been put on paid leave, including the head of the agency's Pittsburgh field office. All agents have been barred from field duties and investigative tasks, though they can still work remotely. One individual was part of Trump's personal protective team. Breitbart reports, people smugglers are throwing boat migrants overboard to evade capture. Smugglers ferrying migrants from Turkey to Greece's eastern islands have in 2 cases adopted the new and dangerous tactic of knocking some passengers off their speedboats into the sea to avoid capture by pursuing coast guards, Greek authorities say. All 8 migrants were rescued in both cases. The incidents come as smugglers using speedboats instead of flimsy inflatable dinghies with small engines adopt increasingly aggressive tactics to dodge Greek marine patrols. Last week, Coast Guards opened fire, killing 1 migrant, after a speedboat allegedly rammed their vessel into the eastern Aegean Sea during a chase. The Greek Coast Guard said Tuesday that in one case, over the weekend, a Palestinian and an Afghan man piloting a speedboat also tried to ram a pursuing patrol boat off the island of Kos. It said they then allegedly forced 5 passengers to jump into the sea, escaping towards the island at the cost as the Coast Guards stopped the rescue of the migrants. And those are your headline news. Alana Alfaro joins us now. She is a former witch and medium who has since come home to the Catholic Church. You may have caught her interview with friend of the network, Angela Erickson. Alana, welcome to the program.
Thank you. Good morning.
Good morning. You have quite the story to tell. I caught some parts of it before our interview today, and all I have to say is, wow, what a testimony. Why don't you start with some background? I mean, tell us a little bit about how you got involved with the occult. What drew you into it?
So I was raised by my grandparents in the South, and I think we didn't go to Mass, maybe because my grandmother didn't know where there was a local Catholic church. I'm not quite sure, but we never went to church. So I was very poorly catechized. And my grandmother did read the Bible every day, and she prayed the rosary every day. So I had that exposure, but that was really it. And then when as I got older and went through catechism, that was really it, like to do my first communion, and I stopped. So when I entered the Marine Corps in 2001, I served as like my platoon's kind of like recruit chaplain. I was always very spiritual since I was a kid. I remember going through my grandmother's Bible and thinking, wow, everyone in here is so cool and I want to be a saint. And my grandmother had a huge devotion to Saint Martin de Porres. And so all of those little things kind of implanted in me a desire to be a saint and to be godly and follow in Christ's footsteps. But because I was poorly catechized, I fell into a lot of New Age deceptions as I embarked on my career in the military. So when I was stationed abroad in the East, I always studied wherever I was deployed. So I would study the history of whatever country I was at and look into their spiritual history as well. So I fell into Buddhism. And I would say that Buddhism was kind of like my gateway into the occult. I studied also the Brahmanism and all of the practices, basically, of the Eastern world. And I thought I was broadening my horizons by becoming very well-rounded in all of these world religions, when in reality, I was just going down a rabbit hole that I was not prepared to combat, I guess you could say, because I was poorly catechized.
You know what's interesting about that is that one of the things that my mother used to tell me growing up is that our strengths are nothing but our weaknesses with the volume turned up too loudly. And the fact of the matter is what you started with here, you said that you were always a very spiritual person. You had a great affinity for the stories in the Bible, and your grandmother exposed you to the practice of the rosary. What this tells me is that you have a very sensitive soul in the sense that you have a strong desire to connect with God on a very grace-filled, very spiritual level. But that desire, without the proper guidance, is very easily led astray in one direction or another. And so the devil used that momentum, that strong innate desire for a deep connection with God, to guide you in more into a connection with himself. And so in a very real sense, your strength, which is your spiritual thirst, the volume was turned up too loud and it went in the wrong direction.
Exactly. I couldn't agree with you more.
So while you were in the military and as you were studying the various religious practices of the countries that you were going into, tell us a little bit about, I want to hear, we'll get into the occult stuff in a moment, but I want to hear kind of the departure. You know, you talked about Buddhism. So how was Buddhism a gateway? What did it lead you to that really kind of wound up in witchcraft? How did that happen?
Well, as you know, in Buddhism, meditation and departure from the self is very important. So lack of attachment to the self and to material things, which really called to me because I'm not a materialistic person. And now I find, okay, well, St. Francis of Assisi was like that. And Santa Teresa de Avila was like that. So I find a healthier alternative, or the correct alternative, right, for these kind of desires or affinities. But at that time, Buddhism spoke to me in that way. And what I have come to realize is that all of the deities or different Buddhas, just like the different gods and different religions, they're all demons. They're all just a deception for the one true God. And I think that once people come to that realization, it's easier to understand how all of these other religions, while they have some grains of truth and they have some beauty within them, Lucifer loves to masquerade as an angel of light, as a being of light and good. And so once you realize that these are all deceptions and they're demons, then you know to steer clear. So I definitely fell into that. And I also started communicating with other people who believed the same things, other mediums. And that's kind of how I went into the whole medium, tarot card reading, and you name it, I did it. You know, when it came to like directed writing, directed drawing, I did it all. Past life regression therapy, telling people about their past lives, all of which are deceptions, and we are warned in the Bible not to do. But unfortunately, once you go down this rabbit hole, you think that you're so much more enlightened and smarter than Bible thumping Christians, because you think you have knowledge that they don't have, when in reality, it's true. It's just that you've bitten the apple that you were not supposed to eat.
Well, and that's really kind of the essence of it. You know, you talked about Buddhism, and what Buddhism teaches is self-annihilation. This idea that you have to completely empty yourself of yourself, which starts with a detachment from the material world, but then you wind up detaching from reality. You take yourself and you move it outside of the realm of the real, and you start kind of disavowing anything around you. And it leads to a particular kind of indifference, that it's a spiritual indifference. And when you combine that with the pagan practice of Brahmanism, which is Hindu ideologies and beliefs, you start opening yourself to various deities. And even though Buddhism is it's a philosophy, it ultimately does fall into the Hindu practices because it was an outgrowth of that. It came from that. Right. So you said that you got involved with various mediums that kind of believed along these same lines. You were talking to people who were other practitioners, but what was your experience? And by the way, experience really is a very hard thing to overcome, because you can reach what you have experienced in your own life and say, hey, this is the reality because I have seen it, I have felt it, I have heard it. Yep. And tell us a little bit about that and how those allurements of experience kept you from pursuing the truth.
One thing I would say is that I had an experience where I saw Jesus and I drew him. And when I showed because I'm an artist, and I showed my drawing to my peers, they were like, wow, that is definitely Christ. Amazing, beautiful. So I had this false Christ that I was attached to, I guess you could say. And I also, I was told by a fellow medium, because of my interest in wanting to have been a religious sister when I was younger, you have the spirit of St. Clair attached to you. We have to get rid of that. I was also told by other mediums that were a lot smarter and experienced than me at the time, that I had this great council, this great hierarchy attached to me that I had inherited. My mother was a witch too, interestingly, and that I had to hone that in. And so I did. So I started reading more and really trying to perfect my craft, because especially for me, I wanted to help people. And I thought, well, if I can do that through mediumship, through spell work or whatever, I want to do that. But of course, I was reading all the wrong books. So, and I definitely did not have the right guidance at the time. Everyone that I was associating with was definitely leading me more and more down that path. A lot of people with associations to Freemasonry. I was reading a lot of self-help books because I've always been interested in self-help. So authors like Marianne Williamson, A Course in Miracles, Eckhart Tolle, and all of which are deceptions that are intended to lead you down the wrong path. I think some of these authors may not have that intention because they are themselves deceived. But that's definitely the case. And like, I'll use A Course in Miracles as an example. The author has the editor has associations with the CIA and MK Ultra, and great psychologists like Carl Jung even declared the piece to be nonsense, gibberish, you know. So I was buying it all, unfortunately, and I thought I was using reason because I love science and reason and logic. So I was buying all of this instead of buying the Christian argument.
I want you to kind of hold that thought, because when we come back, we'll talk a little bit about we'll actually go into your conversion story, how you got out of this. I mean, how do you overcome such a self-deception, which is an incredible thing to overcome. It's amazing, really. Only an act of grace can do it. But when we come back, we'll talk about that. We'll talk about a few other things. Please stay with us. We'll be back in a moment. This is a Catholic Take, a bold synthesis of information and inspiration. We're joined this morning by Ilana Alfaro, and we've been talking about her conversion. Well, actually, her path down into the pit of occultism and witchcraft, and now we're going to talk about her reversion back into the Catholic faith. But before we get into that, I'd like to touch on a little bit. You mentioned in the first half that you had started reading and were talking to people that were involved in Freemasonry. Tell us a little bit about the connection between Freemasonry and the occult.
Well, if you do a lot of research into Freemasonry, you learn that they have a battle against Christianity, especially against the Catholic Church. And when I was stationed overseas, I met I had no idea there were so many Freemasons in the military, especially in the Marine Corps, but some of my superiors that I got along very well with actually encouraged me to join Freemasonry to become I think it was a Northern Star, whatever branch there is for women. There are a few, actually. Because my great-grandfather was a Freemason. So I was told because I had some kind of ancestral connection to Freemasonry that I would be an ideal candidate to go along that path. But thankfully, I didn't do that. That was one of the few things that I never got involved with, thank goodness, because I just was too busy with my job and other things that I had going on at the time. So I didn't feel inclined to go down that path. But I was always very interested in it, not just because of my great-grandfather, but I thought anything that encourages people to broaden their horizons with spiritual knowledge was good. But as I did my research, I realized, this really isn't a good thing, actually.
So you moved away from the occult. I want to read to you very quickly a little brief history of a saint named Bartolo Longo. Bartolo Longo lived from 1841 to 1926. He was an Italian. He was from Sicily. His parents were devout Catholics. But in 1851, his father died and his mother remarried a lawyer. Now, despite Longo's stepfather wanting him to study in order to become a teacher, Longo was set on becoming a lawyer also. In 1861, he succeeded in convincing his stepfather and was sent to the University of Naples to study law. And in the 1860s, of course, the Catholic Church in Italy found itself at odds with the nationalistic movement, and so Longo got involved with General Giuseppe Garibaldi, who was a Freemason. He was also a socialist, there was this struggle between the church and the Italian nationalist movement for Italian unification. And through that struggle, he wound up becoming a part of the spiritualist movement. He got involved in occultism, believed in witchcraft, consulted mediums, and eventually became what he called a satanic priest. He said he was actually ordained a satanic priest. But it was through a friend of his, a guy named Vincenzo Pepe, who convinced him of the Catholic faith, led him to abandon Satanism, and introduced him to a Dominican friar and a Catholic priest who led him to a devotion to Our Lady in the Rosary. So when you tell your story, I hear shades of Bartolo Longo. So tell us a little bit about your conversion out of the occult. What was your first introduction to, you know what, maybe what I'm doing isn't the right thing and I ought to get out of this?
I would say that other New Agers coming to Christ is what really pushed me to go in that direction. I had done my confirmation when I married my husband right before I retired from the Marine Corps. And I think that kind of helped, that put a little seed of a fruitful seed in me to gradually leave all those things behind, because when COVID happened, I started noticing a lot of other New Agers, like Stephen Bancars and Doreen Virtue, a lot of people that practiced all the same things that I practiced, starting to have this come to and realize that what they were doing was wrong. And then you see this huge swath of New Agers having New Aged Christ testimonies on YouTube and other social media platforms. So the Holy Spirit was definitely guiding me in the right direction. I was seeing a lot of this in my own world from people that I knew, other New Agers. And that's when the Hallow app started becoming really popular. And I downloaded it. And because I was able to listen to the Bible in a year and other things like Jeff Cavins, as I was working, as I was doing other things, I was learning finally the beliefs of the church. And so I'm a huge advocate of Hallow. And I started reading other books like The Imitation of Christ and things like that. And that's what kind of cemented everything for me, that I had to leave all those things behind and embrace my Catholic roots and go back home to Rome, as I say. And another thing, too, I also want to give a lot of credit to Father Carlos Martins, because I think the work that a lot of the exorcists do in exposing the demonic and the correlations of these New Age practices that seem harmless, like yoga and meditation and Reiki, they do a really great job of letting people know these are taboo, stay away from them, because once you start opening these doors and doing these practices, you're exposing yourself, you're left vulnerable. And unfortunately, unless you go down the route that I went through, or like a lot of other New Agers, you just don't get it. You don't see the harm in getting a tarot card reading or whatever. But these really experienced priests will tell you the same thing. So I'm very grateful for that.
So when you started listening to the Hallowed app and you started listening to these podcasts, you mentioned Father Carlos Martins, who has a regular podcast called The Exorcist Files. Fantastic series. I highly recommend it. But he talks about people who have been involved in the occult, and he says that they have to, most of the time, they have to go through a series of renunciations. And have you experienced, I don't know if you had any kind of exorcism that was done, or did you have to go through a series of renunciations to break curses? Especially, I mean, if your great grandfather was a Freemason, did you have to do the prayers that broke the binding curse of the Freemasons?
Yes, definitely I did. And I feel that until I did, because before all of that, I had burned every book, every New Age thing that was in my house. I got rid of it. Gems, crystals, you name it. But I had not realized the power of generational curses. And so I had to do a lot of deliverance prayer over a course of time. And it wasn't until then that I finally felt like a sense of relief, because a lot of people that denounce the New Age somehow, some way ends up going back. I never felt that pull. I never felt the need to consult tarot cards for anything. But it was when I did those deliverance prayers that I finally was able to feel that relief.
Wow. Well, thank you so much for joining us, Alana. I understand you'll be joining us for the after show. Join us right back here tomorrow when we feature Dr. Matthew Sakanikas, who's a friend of mine, with a Catholic take on Catholic Zionism. And don't forget to listen to the after show today exclusively on our video feeds right after the show ends. You can even join our conversation directly through the chats on YouTube, Rumble, or Facebook. Thanks so much for joining us this morning. We will see you tomorrow.
The Station of the Cross began broadcasting in Buffalo, New York in 1999. Since then, our listening areas have multiplied and expanded into several states. While our mission is to grow the Catholic faith through radio and other media outlets, our apostolate is supportive of but independent from your local diocese. Through your generosity, we are able to inspire countless listeners with the gospel and help lead them to a parish to be spiritually nourished by the sacraments.
And we're back. Welcome to the after show, everybody. Thank you very much, Alana, for staying on with us. And I will allow the conversation to continue right after I thank some of our lovely insiders here, as Joe always does. So just to welcome everyone. Firstly, in the Catholic Take Telegram group, which we're still for those who enjoy it, we're still looking to see if we need to find an alternative or not. After Brent mentioned the Telegram founder. Or co-founder getting arrested in France and all this sort of thing. So we're not sure if we need to find a replacement for Telegram or whatever. We are looking into it. We'll see what happens. But we have a few folks in there. I think James was the first one up this morning. James16897, good morning to you. Anna Pierman, good morning. And Damon, good morning to you. Who is this here? Was this Damon sending this? I'm not seeing someone. There's someone sending a screenshot of Lepanto Institute, and I can't figure out who was sending the screenshot. Jerome was sending this, talking about the Vatican document using BCE instead of BC. So, good morning, Jerome. Thanks for sending that on. Jane Steves, good morning. Mike K, good morning to you. Eileen Rain, Yvonne, Sharon Felton, it was great to meet you at the conference. Good morning to you all. Melanie, good morning. Jen Nugent. Damon says Zuckerborg, resistance is futile. Yeah, I'm not sure if I trust everything that Zuckerberg is saying, especially when he says, "Oh, we know better now. We're not gonna censor anything ever again. We know better than that." I don't know if I believe him. Rumble, we've got Damon's over there too. Gunslinger Z19, good morning. Apak Gabriel, good morning to you. NCJR, Nick the Mike, good morning. Honey West 25, Sci-Fi Mike, it was great to meet you as well at the conference. We hung out a little bit and chatted about sci-fi, as you might expect. That was great. Lori Eckerman Powell on Facebook, Junior Barra, Don Paddock, Mimi, good morning to you all. Patty's there as well, and Linda and Norman Robert, good morning. Norman saying aloha from Hawaii. What time is it in Hawaii, Norman? I know we've got some Australian listeners who stay up late to listen to us, but which for them it's like the next morning or something like that. However that works, I don't know how that works over in Australia. I have to wrap my mind around it. But Norman, let us know what time it is in Hawaii over there listening to us. Good morning. Thank you. And Dan Hyatt just chimed in. Good morning to you. And YouTube, we've got some of the regulars there. I know we've got Linda, Shaquille, Edwin. Good morning to you all. Yvonne's over there as well. Bridget Dunn, Evelyn Rivera, Chesty Marine, a fellow Marine, Alana. He's a regular listener to our show. So
awesome.
Semper Fi. Good morning, Chesty. Catherine Hickey's there. Miriam is there. I know I saw Helen Grace. There you are. Good morning to you. Laura's there. Laura, I believe. Yep, Laura, we met at the conference as well. It was great to see you there. and Colleen. Anyone else? iCatholic Mobile. David John, he was just on the show yesterday. Check out iCatholicMobile.org. They are a full disclosure. They are a sponsor, a business partner with the Station of the Cross now. So, but check them out if you're looking to support something other than whatever it is Verizon and T-Mobile and all of them believe in. Check out iCatholic Mobile. And anyone else? Anyone else on YouTube? Definitely some other folks. Kilroy Jones, good morning. I saw Albert show up as well. Alberto, from our friend from the UK. Becky Dominguez, good morning. Anyone else? Jim Bowden, good morning. Yep, 9:15 p.m. in Sydney, Australia. Welcome. Thanks for staying up late to listen to our morning show. Barbara Kempfel, good morning. Colin Newbold. Anyone else? Anyone else? I think I saw Christine chime in at some point during the show. A lot of the regulars there. If you've never commented on any of our feeds, comment and say hello. Say good morning. Paul Voss, I agree. Interesting subject. Yes, and thank you, Alana, for getting up early and being on with us to talk about this. It's a really, really amazing stuff. Nani Anthony.
Early bird
there.
catches the worm.
Yes, indeed. Joe makes comments here and there about like, oh man, maybe we should move the show to a slightly later hour or whatever. And I'm like, that'd be great. More time to prepare in the morning, but I think I'd still want to keep my shift because I like being up early. Deborah Saints is there as well, and a couple other folks I think may have. M. Proximus, I know I saw you there too. So good morning, everyone, and thanks for chiming in. So thank you for humoring our hellos there. But Alana, we're very much interested to see more. Michael, go ahead and take it away.
You know, the early bird catches the worm. I always said, well, who wants to eat worms?
Yep.
Birds
Good point.
too.
Good point. Yeah, birds do. So.
No, I'm not a morning person, so I
What are you doing? What are you doing filling in for Joe?
Yeah, you know, I asked myself that this morning, especially since my 1-year-old was up until 1 a.m. last night. Just
oh goodness,
I think he's teething, so he was just not happy.
Teething will do that.
Yep.
Yep. So let's go back to some of the conversations that we were having. You were telling us about your reversion into the church. You were talking about some of the deliverance prayers. You also said that, you know, you didn't realize the hold that witchcraft and the New Age practices and things like that held over you, even though you burnt your books, you got rid of the crystals and all that kind of stuff. You still had to undergo deliverance prayers. So what do you mean when you say that you still had a lot to go through? What was happening that you realized you still needed to break these curses and to go through deliverance?
So I felt a lot of anxiety regularly. And besides that, there was like a lot of tension in my home. A lot of unnecessary bickering and arguing with my spouse. And I mean, no marriage is a cakewalk. You know, every relationship has its trials. And that's part of what makes us stronger. But it was really unnecessary nonsense. And I'm not a drama queen. I don't like drama. I'm very non-confrontational. And I know how to speak to people. I was a recruiter. So being able to de-escalate a situation comes pretty naturally to me, but it just wasn't jiving. There was something amiss. And a lot of unnecessary negativity from even outside sources. So because I have read so many exorcist works and seen so many interviews and listened to so many lectures, I knew that there was just something that was attacking me, something that wasn't natural that was going on. And sure enough, when I did the interview with Angela Erickson, I realized she pointed it out. Well, your mother was a practicing witch and your great-grandfather was a Freemason. And that's kind of like just somebody else saying it is kind of like what you need, like that little light switch to go off. And that's when I started going into the deliverance prayers and I felt kind of like that release, less burden on my back.
Did you have to have a priest intervene, praying over you and conducting these deliverance prayers, or was it more a matter of going to confession and being fully received into the sacraments and doing the breaking the curses? I renounce the curse of Freemasonry. I renounce the curses of witchcraft and that kind of thing.
That's exactly what it was, because I had been going to confession regularly already. And I didn't really notice a difference there, but it was me saying that I denounce and I release all of these things, all of these connections. And actually, I learned so much about Freemasonry just in doing that alone, because a lot of these prayers go into a lot of detail. You have to be very detailed with what you say. And I in correlation, I tell people that Satanism, whether it masquerades as any other religion or any other practice like meditation or yoga, whatever it is, seems harmless, but there's the universal law. And when I went to see the relic of St. Judas Thaddeus, which was great. And I met Father Carlos Martins and helped him pack up after that mass and the exposition of the relic. I realized something that he said in his mass really spoke to me, especially coming from the occult. He said that when you approach the relic, when you are talking to the saint, for example, be very specific in your request. Tell them, I want you to be my friend and I want you in my life, so on and so forth. And the point being that there is power in your words. So just like when you're doing a spell, for example, as a witch, you're kind of doing the same thing as a Christian or as a Catholic with your prayers. And I think that's one reason that the rosary is so powerful. I call them battle beads. And because 100%, it's your defense in battle, whether you realize it or not. There's power in words.
So in giving the denunciations, of Father Carlos Martins has spoken about this a number of times, that what you're doing is you're breaking the legal contract that the devil has with certain rights. As for instance, when you commit a mortal sin, you give the devil certain rights over you by turning yourself over to the devil. You're saying, hey, I want to be aligned with you, as opposed to being aligned with God, who said, don't do this. So you're actually breaking a series of contracts, the legal contracts. It's kind of funny. The devil's a legalist, but you're breaking those contracts. And then what you're doing is you're turning around and you're reestablishing or reaffirming your covenant with God and saying, I am yours, Lord. I renounce the devil, which is something that we say in baptism. And so it's a very beautiful progression to be delivered from the devil, to renounce the devil, and then also to reaffirm your loving relationship with Christ.
Yes, I agree.
Do you mind if I sneak in a question here, Michael?
Yeah, go right ahead.
So, because Deborah was asking the exact same question that I had in my head. So, Alana, did you have or do you have like any kind of tattoos or other things that were signs of occult practices or anything like that? Did you have to get them removed, or were there ways, like how was that dealt with, if there was anything like that on your person or that you were involved with?
So I have a lot of tattoos, and thankfully I only got one tattoo that was associated with the occult, and I had that removed.
Okay.
So all the other tattoos I have are mementos from my deployments. Like instead of collecting tchotchkes, I would collect tattoos.
Yeah.
So they have meaning, but none of them have a spiritual meaning. And thank goodness for that, because that would be really expensive to remove.
I'll bet. Good to know.
Yeah. Yes.
So one thing, the Lepanto Institute, one of the things that we do is we investigate various organizations that are involved with the Catholic Church in some way, shape, or form, and we expose them as either being aligned with the Church or being against it. And one of the organizations that we're constantly going after is the Catholic Campaign for Human Development, because they're a granting organization. The organizations that receive their funds are community organizers, and a lot of them, I have found, are involved with the occult in some way, shape, or form. One of the groups that we discovered is a group called the Ostara Initiative. And the symbolism of the Ostara Initiative is the triple goddess. You know, you've got the circle with the two crescent moons on either side. Of course, Ostara is a reference to a Wiccan holiday. They have various other symbols. So what I want to kind of get into a little bit, maybe you can talk about this. As I have been investigating these organizations and coming to understand certain occult symbology, I'm seeing allusions to the occult in a lot of places, whether it's pop culture or whether it's things that are going on, just corporate logos even. Taco Bell ran a series of commercials, I think about 10 years ago, which had symbols of the Illuminati, and it was bizarre. Tell us a little bit, have you seen occult symbology in pop culture and in corporate logos and various other places that I have seen?
Everywhere. I see it everywhere all the time. And actually, when I see these symbolisms, that to me is an indicator to steer clear. Even a lot of artists now, like Taylor Swift, she started out as an innocent country girl, and now she's on a stage, scantily dressed with snakes. So we all know who the snake represents. And even like the symbol of medicine, the snake on a staff, it's supposed to be the double snake, right? But and this is a reference to the god Apollo. And there are so many references to other, like you mentioned, Ostara and the crone, the maiden mother crone, the triple goddess. And I see it now even on kids' t-shirts, like the moon with the two half crescent moons. And a lot of these people are exposing themselves to things they don't realize what they're exposing themselves to. But I see it everywhere as well.
Yeah, it's staggering actually to see just how steeped in the occult our culture really is. I mean, even on the back of the $1 bill, the flip side of the seal of the United States, you have the pyramid with the separated capstone. The capstone's missing, and what you have is an eye in a triangle with the rays of light coming out. It's a Masonic symbol, and it has certain occult references to that as well. So it's just staggering to see how steeped in the occult our modern culture is.
Actually, you know what's interesting is that some of those symbols even began as Catholic symbols and then got co-opted. Like the one that I like to bring up is one of them actually is the all-seeing eye, just the eye in the triangle. There are old Catholic churches where that was used as a symbol of God, of all-seeing wisdom, you know, with the triangle representing the Trinity. And then Masons kind of took it and inverted it, and you know, obviously the capstone, the cornerstone stuff that has to go into the actual masonry part of Freemasonry and building the temple and all of that sort of thing. But there's also the pentagram. There's an old poem, the Sir Gawain and the Green Knight, that goes into Sir Gawain's accoutrement for being a knight. And on the back of his shield, he has Our Lady painted so that he always knows what he's fighting for. And on the front of his shield, he actually has a pentagram, not the one with the circle around it, but the star, the 5-pointed star. And that stood for the 5 wounds of Christ, as well as other, you know, five numerated virtues and things like that, but particularly the 5 wounds of Christ. And then it's kind of like the upside down cross, you know, that's really, you know, St. Peter was crucified upside down, but then, you know, modern kind of occult practices take this into like, well, we're going to show it as turning, you know, inverting Christianity, which is an evil thing to do. So you're kind of stuck, and with losing some great symbols from, medieval Catholicism in a certain way, because it's hard to reclaim them without, running into these people who use them for nefarious purposes. But I would be interested to see just how many people. I'll bet there's a lot of people, and including a lot of companies, I don't think, again, like Amazon and Verizon are colluding to say, oh, let's put an occult symbol on this or that or whatever. But you never know who is just doing it because, oh, here's a neat symbol that I saw, or oh, this means, generic kind of secular approach to something that actually has an occult origin, like a Greek god or something like that, like a Marvel superhero being Thor, who is based on a Norse pagan god, and all the gods.
Or like Nike.
Excuse me. Yeah, or Nike,
Yeah.
Like that's in a lot of ways that's done just because these people don't know. They're just like, oh, it's a cool mythology thing. It's fake anyway. Whatever. Let's just use it. And then that's how some things sneak in. But I'd be interested to see or know, if it was even possible to know, how many people are doing it on purpose. How many people are saying, let's make our symbol this because this is the kind of thing that we're into.
Well, remember, Milton Bradley is the company that produces the Ouija board.
The Ouija board, exactly.
It's a toy company.
It's a patented. You can't even it's an actual patented name for their game that they call it. And of course they advertise it as like this is not a real thing. This is just a fun thing to do or whatever. Which is exactly the you're still opening yourself up to that. A lot of people like to discount the Satanic Panic stuff from the 80s and 90s, but they were right about a lot. Maybe not everything they were right about. Some people can jump at shadows if you're jumping at everything, but they were right about a lot.
For sure.
Yeah.
And the occultists are really great at inversion, just like with the power of words and like you pointed out with a lot of the symbols. But a lot of priests will say this: you will not have Satanists breaking down doors to get at any Protestant service, but they will do that for a Catholic Mass to get to the Eucharist. And like you said, St. Peter's cross, them wearing the cross, they don't even realize what they're wearing. Mm-hmm. So you see a lot of this ignorance even on the part of occultists, where they don't even realize a lot of what they're saying or what they're doing. Mm-hmm.
When I was growing up, I remember distinctly that some Satanists had broken into our church. They used a crowbar to open up the tabernacle, and they stole the hosts. Oh my goodness! And I remember hearing about it because my grandparents were on the parish council, so I was hearing this all from them. But the Satanists had desecrated the Holy Eucharist in a cemetery, and they were spreading the Eucharist on these headstones. And of course, there were signs of various things going on also. But they stole the gold patens. They stole one of the chalices, and I mean, they stole a lot of stuff, and they did a lot of damage. And I remember our priest doing prayers of reparation because of what had happened. But you're absolutely right that you don't have Satanists breaking down the doors of the local Baptist church to steal their grape juice and white bread.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
they know what they're doing. They know what they're going after.
Here's 100%. A
Hundred
question for you. One of the things that I know about Freemasonry, I did my senior thesis on Freemasonry when I was in college. And so I read and read and read. And ultimately, at the height of it, what you discover is that Freemasonry is a Luciferian religion. Meaning what they're proposing is that God, Adonai, is actually the god of evil, and that Lucifer is the light bearer. He's the one who is the one to be venerated. And it's all Promethean. So the myth of Prometheus, who was chained to a rock by Zeus because he brought fire to man, gave him enlightenment, as it were. Mm-hmm. And his punishment was to be chained to this rock to have his liver eaten by a vulture every day. And it would regrow, and then the vulture would come back the next day. Did you experience, or did you witness also any practice of Luciferianism or the lead to Luciferianism, this idea that Lucifer is actually the god of good?
No. So the Freemasons that I've encountered are all very low level, and I think at the lowest levels they're very ignorant to that. I don't think they realize what it escalates to, like at the 32nd and 33rd levels, or, and even like leading up to that. And all of the people that I've met and encountered, they were all very nice people, very, very sweet and well-meaning. And so I think there's a level of ignorance at the lower levels. And it only when, as you start progressing, do you realize how nefarious it all really is. Kind of like socialism and communism, Right. There are some great ideas, like we want to be charitable and spread the wealth. That sounds all well and good. But once you start digging, then you realize how evil it really is.
Very materialistic.
Yeah, totally.
Yes,
and
yes.
One thing that I've also found is that there seems to be a distinct connection between socialism. You brought up socialism and communism. There's a lot of correlation between socialism and communism and the occult. You find that,
Yes.
Especially within homosexuality, there's a lot of occult practice within the homosexual community. Can you speak to that a little bit?
So I think when you have some kind of trauma, it opens you up to going down that occult path. So instead of relying on Christ and going to a priest for help, you'll go to a tarot card reader. You'll go to get a Reiki therapy session. And so all of this exposes you more and more. It's kind of like a cup that starts getting full of dirty, polluted water, and it begins to overflow. So I think, you also see studies show that people who practice or are homosexual or part of the alphabet community have some sort of trauma or mental illness. So I think that that's why that community in particular is so easily succumbs to the occult, because they're getting therapy and healing from all the wrong places.
Wow. Wow. One of the things that you talked about, you're involved in various things, but you mentioned your artwork. And you said that you had drawn this picture of Christ, but it was a false Christ. How did you come to draw this? And what was it about this image that made it a false Christ?
Well, I think maybe it might have looked the way that Christ may have looked, like a Middle Eastern man with curly hair and bronze skin. But to me, it's a false Christ because even if you're having an out-of-body experience, or you're through meditation get to a point where you're seeing or you're hallucinating and seeing different things, it's not from Christ. So anything that I experienced during that period, I attribute to demonic influence.
Can I?
Did you? Go ahead.
No, okay. I just have a listener question here. Someone's asking about kind of similar to the question you just asked, Michael. But how about drug use in these communities and these groups? How is drug use kind of correlated with the occult? I don't know if you were heavily involved in anything like that, but is there a lot of crossover there?
Definitely. So I'm not a user. Have not been, thank goodness. Yeah. I did try pot when I was younger, and it didn't tickle my fancy. Thank goodness.
Yes.
But even in the military, you'll find a lot of people, even though you're not supposed to, a lot of kids experimenting with drugs. And from my research and from people that I've met that are in the occult, there definitely is a lot of use of drugs and psychedelics, and they think that these plant substances are put on earth for us to enjoy. God created it, so it must be good. And they use these substances like mushrooms or psilocybin. I'm not very well versed in that, but LSD, even marijuana, so that they can have out-of-body experiences. And it's unfortunately, it's another deception that these things are okay.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So you, in your experience, I mean, you were practicing witchcraft. Was it mostly divination, or you'd mentioned casting spells? So I'm assuming that you were in some way communing with spirits. What was your experience with that?
Yeah, so I did do a little bit of that, and it was mostly to help some people like find a job or find love. But more than anything, it was divination. It was tarot card reading and going into people's book of life and telling them about their past lives. And a lot of mediumship.
Did you hear demonic voices or whispers in your
Yes.
ear or anything? You did.
Oh, my
Definitely. Definitely.
Wow.
So a lot of people that I would speak with would be people's ancestors, which I now know they were demons masquerading as ancestors or loved ones. But hindsight's 2020, right? And so a lot of that, and a lot of the past life regression therapy, like a lot of the things that I would see seemed very real. There was even a time where I thought I was communicating with Saint Michael the Archangel, and I physically felt like my wrist being grabbed, and I thought it was him. And that just goes to show like how off your rocker you get once you go down that rabbit hole, but also how easy it is to believe all of this, because like you mentioned earlier, you're a saint, or at least you think you're sane at the moment, but you're experiencing these very real experiences. So you think that, oh, this has to be legit.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's another reason that people who practice the occult, they buy into it so much, because they are told very private things from their lives or about their family. And sometimes it even gets physical, where they feel something or even feel like a healing, which we all know in reality is a deception from the demonic to get you to buy into it and go further down the rabbit hole. But unfortunately, you don't realize that until it's too late.
It's kind of once again, like with communism, with socialism, it's prioritizing the material over the spiritual. It's prioritizing what you can feel or experience that seems real versus having belief without seeing. That's you're called to believe in God without seeing the actual effects. You're called to believe without feeling the good things and the consolation. You still have to persevere in believing. And so, especially when a very materialistic culture and a materialistic person gets these experiences that feel real because you felt something touch you or you felt something happen, then that seems like it's the realest thing, as opposed to this concept of a God that you can't experience or see or talk to or hear speaking in your ear. It's just the classic prioritizing the material world over what is actually real and goes beyond that.
And if I may piggyback off of that concept of the materialism, is also the fact that people make a lot of money doing all of this, doing Reiki and chakra cleansing and meditation sessions, yoga, all of it, tarot card readings, palm readings, you name it. There's always a monetary cost involved. So for all the people that are wounded in whatever way and are seeking help through these means, or want a quick fix, like I need a job and I need it now, let me go to a psychic and so she can tell me what I need to do. They want it now, just like we are now with social media and streaming. We want to watch and binge everything now. So it's the same thing in these occult new age practices where they're making a lot of money off of all of this. So even if you're a person who says, I'm not materialistic, I just want to help people, I'm a good person, you're making a lot of money helping these people. And I do think some of these people are well-intentioned and you just don't realize that how materialistic they really are. But like in my case, I never charged a dime for any of the readings I did because I just felt if I have this gift from God, I'm supposed to just share it and help people. It shouldn't be because I'm benefiting monetarily. And I felt that would keep me honest. But a lot of people make a lot of money doing this work.
Yeah, it's possible that's one of the things that helped keep you safe because you weren't getting sucked into that basic greed for money, that might have kept you in that world longer than you were. So thank God for that.
Yes.
It's very interesting. The way it starts with a self-deception that you wind up deceiving yourself into believing that the spiritual world is something that it isn't. And this self-deception is then almost like a confirmation bias, like the devil is affirming what you had deceived yourself into believing. So now you're kind of in this trap where you started off by deceiving yourself. The devil is now affirming you in this deception. And then you wind up falling into this never-ending spiral of confirmation bias where everything that you had experienced is now affirming everything that you thought you believed, which has more experience, and it just kind of spirals and spirals and spirals out of control. It's amazing that you were able to get out of this at all.
Yeah, I'm very grateful. And I give a lot of credit to St. Pope John Paul II too, because a lot of us don't realize how lucky we are to have lived during his pontificate and being able to see a saint on TV. So I think like being able to see and experience that even as a child, it stayed with me even into adulthood. Mother Teresa too. So even though I was definitely not going in the right direction, having those little seeds or those little memories stayed with me. Thank goodness. And I'm very grateful for that.
Amen.
Yeah. And as a matter of fact, I went to an elevation worship concert in Central Park recently, and the guy standing in front of me in the crowd, on one arm he had Saint Mother Teresa, and on the other he had Papa Juan Pablo tattooed. So I thought, how cool. Yeah. So I had to tell him, I'm really glad to be in the company of saints right now.
Amen. All it takes is that little nudge.
Yeah.
So we probably should wrap up. We're a little over our usual time for the after show today. So thank you so much, Alana, for staying on and chatting with us.
My pleasure.
For answering all these questions.
Absolutely.
Yep.
My pleasure.
And we'll be back. I'm putting a link to your interview with Angela as well in our show notes. So, but we've got tomorrow. Michael and I will be back, and we've got Joe interviewing Dr. Matthew Tsakanikas. So that should be great. So join us. Awesome. Thank you again, Alana. God bless you all.
Thank you. Pleasure. Cheers.